Wanted to see what would grow and what wouldn't grow. We're at about 2,900 feet. It was actually a greater revelation.
Somehow I think our Father has a purpose in all of this. One of his purposes is to keep us in the Word.
But what we're trying to show people is that they can actually do this. And I know they can because we're doing it. So I want to welcome everyone here, and those that are joining us online. I'd like to welcome you too from wherever you are. And we're going to be talking about wars and rumors of wars tonight. Some of you may be watching the news and be aware of what's going on and what's shaping up in the world, and the prophecies actually tell us. We don't need to be of those of the mind that, well, we've had wars and rumors of wars for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. How do we know that we're there? Well, this prophecy is very clear. Actually, Yeshua pinpoints the war that begins the time of the end. And we're going to open that up. And tonight I've got some little bit of news I'm going to be mixing in with this, just so you can see that some of the things that I'm going to say and some of these prophecies, they're verified by what we're finding on the news today, even this day. So we're going to be looking at that. And that gives me a little bit of confirmation that these things are actually unfolding right before us. The players are in place and all of that. So before we start, let's bow our heads and ask for the Spirit that inspired the Word would help us to understand it. Father in heaven, we thank you again for your Word that is sure. And Father, again tonight as we study it, we want to claim the promise that you would cover our sins, that you would live inside of us, and you would lead us and guide us into all truth. And Father, we claim that promise today, and we claim the promise that was on its heels, that you would show us things to come. You have promised that you would warn your church of the troublous times that are before us, and you surely have done that. And we want to take that counsel that you have for us today so that we can plan our lives accordingly. So we can do those things that we need to do today and not put them off when it's going to be too late. We ask you to be with us now. We pray these things in Yeshua's name. Amen. So Yeshua talked about the signs of the end, and the disciples came to him. It's interesting that it says they came to him privately, and we don't often think of that, but it was kind of the inside circle. It was James, John, Peter, and Andrew, the two sets of brothers. It seems that either they were the bravest or the rest of the disciples said, you know, he'll tell you guys, but I'm not so sure he's going to tell us all. It was kind of there was dispute going on between them. Yeshua had just come from the temple with his disciples, and they were trying to demonstrate how beautiful the temple was, because for whatever reason, Yeshua seemed to miss the glory of the temple when he was walking out, and the disciples came to him, haven't you noticed how glorious this place is? And then he kind of looked at him and he said, well, I got some bad news for you. Not one stone shall be upon another. All will be thrown down. And that was a bit of a shocker for these people, the disciples, and they didn't know what he was talking about. And I can only think of, as Yeshua was making his way up the mountain, he knew there was challenges within the disciples. They were still disputing on who would be the greatest, and so on. And for whatever reason, 4 of his disciples went to him privately when they got on top of the Mount of Olives, and they said, tell us when these things will be and what will be the sign of your coming. So the context, the question revolves around his coming. Now, which coming would that be? It's first coming or second coming? Second. It has to be the second coming. So he lays out the prophecy. He gives the wide strokes of the brush, if you will, and he just starts unpacking some of this stuff. but a lot of it's very general. It's kind of like a lot of generations that have gone before us could apply all these things. It's persecution, the destruction of Jerusalem. They will kill you thinking they're doing God's service, an abomination of desolation. It's very interesting how previous generations that have gone before us have applied a lot of Matthew 24 to history. But us here at the end, clearly we know that they were not at the time that he spoke about, the time of the end. And the disciples asked specifically in Luke, he says, when are these things about to take place? So the signs, they wanted to know the signs when he was about to come, when he was knocking on the door to come. That's not 100 years ago. That's not 200 years ago. That's not 500 years ago. That's not 1,000 years ago, or even 2,000 years. The disciples read the prophecies as if he was going to come back in their day. And this is really evident as we look through this. A good example is Peter when he stood up on the day of Pentecost and he said, this is what was spoken of by the prophet Joel, that in the last days I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, speaking of the Father and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And we can see 2020 hindsight now, which Peter did not have. He saw some of the signs, the smoke, the fire, and the earthquake, and the sun being blackened. These things, some of these things happened at the death of Yeshua. There was a great earthquake, the sun was darkened. He was applying those prophecies in his day, and he believed with all of his heart that was a fulfillment. And when the Holy Spirit was outpoured on Peter and the disciples, they thought for sure this is Joel's prophecy just before he's going to return. And as we read through the New Testament, we can see clearly the disciples believed with all of their heart that Yeshua was coming back. And Peter wasn't the only one. John spoke of these things too. He talks about truly the Antichrist is coming and is already here. So they were thinking that this thing was all rolling. Paul says, let those have wives be as though they have none, because the time is short. Now, you guys that are married, that might get you into trouble sometimes, but you've got to take that in the context and understand what he's trying to say. In other words, he's trying to say, when we come right down to the wire, we've got to have our focus on the right thing. And Paul also says that we who are alive will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. So we can see the disciples believe that, and that's the way they passed on the information. So that generated that kind of mindset. People always went through history as if, when is he coming? When is he coming? The exclamation, or they exclaimed in the prophecies, is, how long, O Lord? That was, do you find you guys are asking how long? Has anyone asked how long? I have that question in me. How long do you think it's going to be? How long? We don't know how long, but when these signs start to unfold, we're going to know it's near. This is what Yeshua says. When you see all these things, that's the events of the prophecies. When we see these prophecies start to be fulfilled, line upon line, precept upon precept, we can know that their fulfillment is near. And I have this idea that these last moments of prophetic history that are before us are going to be fulfilled in quick succession. It's like when the fire lights, it's going to be like fire in the stubble. This is how it's going to happen. This is why we want to be ready before it starts. Because we want to get ready before it starts, not only spiritually, but physically as well. And I can't overemphasize that. It's so important. A lot of people are just thinking, oh, you need to live as Yeshua is coming. You need to live as if Yeshua is going to come tomorrow, or Jesus is going to come tomorrow. I'll tell you what, our God is so much wiser than that. He knows that we need to know. That's why Yeshua said, you will know that the end is near. Not, he said, you will think. The previous generations have thought the end was near, and they ordered their lives accordingly. If we know that the end is near, and know that we have to pull out all the stops, everything that's holding us back has to go. We have to get it out of our backpacks. We have to, tie up our shoelaces and be ready to go when he tells us to go. So we're going to be looking at the very first sign that Yeshua says is going to happen first. And it's wars and rumors of wars. But like I said at the onset, it's not just any old war. It's a specific war. And if anyone's watching the news these days, they can see war brewing. Who can see war brewing? Okay. Who is war brewing with? In the Middle East is the hottest, probably the hottest place. United States, okay. United States is a major player in this. And any other wars? Russia. Russia is pushing itself to the front. They are flexing their military muscles right now. There's a lot of things that they're doing. We could go on and on about how these countries are jostling themselves because they have a plan and they're working together. This is what a lot of people don't understand. China and Russia have a plan, and it's to break the United States. Do you realize that? Well, when China and Russia, which are working together now to bring this plan to pass, China and Russia are building their military like crazy now. They are building their military and they are ready to go on the move. So the question is, are we going to have war with Russia or with China and Russia together? With the Muslims and China and Russia? Or what war are we going to have? And so this is the confusion that we have today, is we can see war on the horizon, but who's going to war? And so there's a lot of confusion on that. We need to look at the prophecies and we can see the specific players that are going to be involved. And this is what we want to look at tonight. Very interesting that goes along with that concept is the very first thing Yeshua said when he answers the question, before he gives the delineation of all the events that are in chronological order, he says, don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. And many will come in my name. Those are people that are teaching in his name. We can't miss that. So that means that everyone, as far as I can tell, when you look at what he said, everyone that's teaching Bible prophecy that claims to be a follower of Yeshua and teaching that the time is near qualifies as a deceiver, according to Yeshua. So what should that mean to everyone that's listening to teachers today? What does that mean? Everything has to be tested. It doesn't matter how long you have believed something or someone else, some great teacher has believed something. Do you know that the length of time that you believe something will never turn it into truth if it's false? It can't happen. Truth will stand all by itself and it won't fall over, and you don't have to stand with it. That's just the fact. So when we see truth, we have to take our stand with it because it will move forward without us if we don't. And these are hard realities for us, but we really have to do diligence and not take anyone's. Don't take my word for it. Don't take the YouTube's word for it, your barber's, your hairdresser, I don't care who it is. You cannot take anyone's word for it. You have to go back to the word. And this follows after what Paul said. What did Paul say? The Bereans were more noble than those, I believe it was in Thessalonica, for they went home and they searched the word daily to see if what he said was true. And this is the problem that we have today, is we're following teachers, and I'm not pointing at everyone else, I have to talk to myself. When we start following teachers because what they're saying seems to make sense, that should be a red flag that maybe it doesn't make sense. If it makes sense to our finite minds, there's a good chance it may not be true. We've got to challenge everything that we hear. The devil is out there as a roaring, seeking to anyone he can and to everyone he can. We do not want to fall prey to that. So we're going to look at, because Daniel focuses on, Yeshua focuses on Daniel during the prophecy of Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. The only prophet that he focuses on is Daniel, and he quotes Daniel twice. So if it's the only prophet that he quotes, and he quotes them twice about the time of the end, just before he comes, which prophet do you suppose we should be spending most of our time with? Really? Well, I talk to people all the time, and I ask them, when was the last time you read Daniel? I don't know. What about the beasts in Daniel chapter 7? What beasts? Like, they don't even know what it says. This is kind of like a little deja vu for us. At the time Yeshua was here, guess what? They were reading all the wrong prophecies. When someone came telling them that the king was about to come, nobody told us. Why? They were reading the wrong books, the wrong prophecies. Do you know that unless we learn the lessons of history, we are doomed to repeat them? You know, the more time goes on, the more I'm seeing that we have not learned the lessons of history. In fact, I've heard it said that we have learned something from history, and that is that we don't learn from history. That's scary, because that means we will repeat them. Well, do you know what? We don't have to repeat those lessons if we can learn them. And so this book here is full of lessons of the past. It tells us how God acted with his people. It tells us what God did when his people misbehaved. What did he do? He sent them into captivity. Yeah. He let them fall prey to their enemies when they misbehaved. Do you believe that God will do the same thing today? Is he not the same as yesterday, today, and forever? He works the same way. You know, he's really kind of neat that way. We can trust him. When we see how he works in the past, we know that he'll work that way in the future. And right now, he's working that way. He is about to have the enemies come down and take his people by storm today. The greatest Trojan horse that has ever been set in place is already throughout the world. In fact, most nations are welcoming the gift of millions of destitute refugees. Now, I want to, on the onset, help everyone understand. I know there's listeners that are going to be watching this worldwide, all over the place. And I want to say that I have nothing against any people group. There's some very dangerous ideologies, some radicalized ideology out there. And I'm saying on both sides of the fence that we're going to be talking about. West and East, it's radical on both sides. And I don't have any part of either one. I'm just reading a book, trying to get some information out to people that this is what the book says. And that's what we're going to be looking at tonight. We're going to be, not my opinion, what I think, but what the book reveals. And that's what I want to focus on, is what the book reveals. Daniel chapter 8 is where we're going to start. Yeshua quotes two things. He says, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. If this is a book for the end of time, and he says, let the reader understand, would you consider you would be one of those readers? Yes, absolutely. If you're not reading what he told you to read, what he told you to understand, there's a good chance that you will be deceived. That's his thought, not mine. I'm just echoing what he said. So if we're not going to the right places, we are going to be in trouble and line ourselves up for deception. So in Daniel chapter 8 is the first glimpse we have of this abomination of desolation. We are not going to talk about that tonight. It's just how we get to Daniel. That's how we get to Daniel. He quotes him twice. He also quotes Daniel chapter 12. that there will be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. That's Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. And Daniel chapter 12, when you look at that in its entirety, you can see that is talking about the whole book of Daniel. And we're going to look at a couple verses out of that as we go here in a few minutes. So we can see here in Daniel 8, we're going to go back to Daniel 8, and we're going to see something very interesting. Daniel chapter 8 opens with war. We can see a building up of war. This is what the whole of Daniel 8 is talking about up until the first 8 verses, And then it goes on to what happens after the war. We're not going to cover that. We're just going to cover the portion he talks about war, because that was the first sign he gave. That was the book of Daniel that he gave. And so what we're looking for is war to begin the time of the end, because that's where he said the war would be, at the beginning. So we're looking in Daniel, again, we're looking in Daniel to try and find a place where it talks about war, and it's at the beginning of a prophecy, not at the end of a prophecy. Are you following what I'm saying here? Okay. So in Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel 10 through 12, these two prophecies are sister prophecies. They're twin sister prophecies. But if you look carefully at its twin, 10 through 12, you can see there's a few differences, but there's enough identical attributes in these two prophecies that we can know they are both talking about the same events. So it's the way God lays out the prophecies. He gives one prophecy, then he gives another one to lay out and fill some of the gaps. It's just more pieces of the puzzle that he's given us all the time. So we're looking at Daniel 8, and it's a ram. It talks about a ram and a male goat. Now, for you that were here, most of you were here on the first couple of nights, we talked about Daniel 7. What did we find out about interpreting Bible prophecy when we found animals in the prophecy? What did we learn?
We learned that they were the same as Revelation.
Okay, we learned that these animals in Daniel chapter 7 were the same animals, same exact animals as Revelation chapter 13. But specifically, we can interpret the Bible using the Bible. We don't need anyone else to come in and interpret this for us. We have some ground rules. So animals, what did we find that animals represent in Bible prophecy? Kingdoms, sure. And we also learned that when God was talking about kingdoms in Bible prophecy, it's very likely he was talking about the most important kingdoms at the time of the end. He's not talking about these small little kingdoms because they really don't make a difference. He's talking about the kingdoms that make a difference. So we have a ram kingdom and we have a goat kingdom. Now, what happens if we have horns on these animals? What is it? So what did we learn from Daniel 7 and Revelation 13? Horns represent kings as well. So when an animal has horns, that would represent a unification of kingdoms. And the horns would represent those kingdoms that control that amalgamation, so to speak. Is that making sense? We learned that the other night. And so we're going to carry those concepts forward into this prophecy as well, because God's not going to change it up on us. He's always working the same way, and we can interpret these prophecies using the same symbols and exactly how he's done it before. Daniel chapter 8, verse 17. We're just going to look at a few verses that help us see the time context so that we can put the time context in the same context where the disciples asked, what will be the signs of your coming and when will these things about to take place? So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at, do these prophecies actually indicate within themselves that they are for the time of the end? That's what we're trying to look at, because if they don't indicate that, there's really not much point in looking at them. Would you agree? Other than he said we should look at them. But if they don't have the time context in the time of the end, then they may not fit what we're looking at. So let's see what he says. And by the way, this should be of interest. Yeshua himself shows up in the book of Daniel several times. Several times. He shows up in this prophecy. In fact, he's the one that's talking to another holy one. And there's a conversation going back and forth. And Yeshua says to Gabriel, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. Then Gabriel says, understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. Now you can look at this verse in lots of different translations. This is what I like to do, is look in different translations. Don't just take one translation. Look at a series of translations. I don't know about you, but I got lots of translations on my eSword. I've downloaded a whole bunch. And so I can get what a number of people are thinking on this prophecy. And then it's good to have the concordances, that you can get the Hebrew word and find out the meanings. When you start to get into the nitty-gritty, you kind of need that, because some words have just a little, the English doesn't quite bring it out clearly, and we're going to look at a couple instances there that we really don't get the whole force of some of these words until we look at them. So understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to the time of what?
The end.
The end. Is the time of the end behind us, or are we here? Do you believe that we are at the time of the end? So this prophecy should be of utmost importance for us if we believe we're at the time of the end. Because Yeshua himself says, Daniel. Then Yeshua says to Gabriel, Gabriel, make this man understand. The vision is for the time of the end. This is how we can say Daniel equals Matthew 24. Is that really, really clear? I hope so, because according to Yeshua, it was really clear to him, and that's why he pointed it out. And he said, Gabriel says again, because Daniel didn't get it. You look in the, Daniel was trying to understand what this was all meaning. And he told him, look, Daniel, this is at the end. You're not going to get this. And then he said again, second time, Daniel, I know you're struggling with this. I know you're trying to understand this. But Daniel, look, I'm making known to you what shall happen in the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. I want to ask you again, are we living at the time of the end? Yes. This prophecy twice now has told us we're living, this prophecy is at the time of the end. I don't have to interpret that. It says that. And the interesting part about the appointed time, it's the moed. This word here is moed. In Hebrew, it's moed, which is also used a lot of times, the word festival. Now let's think about this for a second, because this is very interesting. When Yeshua came, it seems, for those that are studying, it seems that he was born on festival time. He came to Jerusalem on the 10th day of the first month, which is festival time. He died on festival time at the time of the Passover, at the exact moment of the third hour of the day when the Passover lamb was to be sacrificed, at the time of the evening offering. He rose on festival time. So I want to ask you, is God going to change the way he operates in midstream? No. In fact, we're told that the day of his coming should not take us unawares. Why? Because those that are studying the book of Daniel are finding out that this power in the world has changed times and laws. He's buried it under all the fables and traditions he can get a hold of, i.e. Christmas and Easter, just in case somebody doesn't know. That has replaced Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. The focus now by Christians worldwide, basically, is Christmas and Easter. Those are their high holy days. That is an apostate church. God says, learn not the way of the heathen. Anyone that wants to just do themselves a favor, just take a look at where Easter and Christmas came from. They are the ways of the heathen. The way I opened was God is about to bring the enemies of his people upon them because they are in full-blown apostasy. This is serious stuff because we live amidst that. When Daniel was taken captivity, you know what? The innocent suffered with the guilty. What a concept. Oh, but God's going to take us out of here. Oh, really? When in history has he done that? He's not going to change the way he works. He's not going to change. If we don't get out of town, if we don't start wisening up, we will suffer with the guilty. We're going to suffer. This war is the churches, the Western civilization. Their enemies are coming down on them like a flood. They have set Trojan horses all over the world. And like I said, we've invited them in. Now that doesn't mean they're all bad, but it doesn't take a few radicals to ruin your day. Not even in one city. We know what happened in New York, and I know there's lots of controversy on what happened in New York, on the World Trade Centers. But we know what they're capable of. We do know what they're capable of. So we need to be aware. Daniel 8:26, again, 3 times in this vision. You are to keep the vision secret because it is about days in the distant future. Now that's the complete Jewish Bible trying to bring out the meaning, the Hebraic meaning of the text. This is what it says. So we have 3 times in this prophecy, what is it that we don't get about this prophecy? And we're trying to say that it's all been fulfilled in history. I'd rather take Yeshua's word and Gabriel's word than some pastor's word or some priest's word. We just can't do that. We've got to take his word over. Now, I did mention that Daniel chapter 10 through 12, parallel prophecy. And we want to look at something there too. Daniel 10 verse 1 is the beginning. This is exactly the same prophecy, but much more detailed. But it's amazing. It starts exactly the same. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belshazzar. And the thing was true, even a great warfare. The beginning of the prophecy sets the stage, just like Yeshua said, go to Daniel. Go to Daniel. We've seen this. We're going to open up Daniel chapter 8, and we're going to see war begins, Daniel chapter 8. The parallel prophecy, it involves a great conflict. The time of trouble such as there never was since there was a nation. That's what's going on here. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Now, I'm sure some of you are reading your Bibles and you say, that's not what mine says. Whose Bible doesn't it say that? It doesn't say that. And you're thinking, where's he getting this from? You want to check out the Hebrew. Some translations say a great conflict. Does anyone have that in their Bible? Yeah, we've got one over here. You want to check out the actual Hebrew and go back to the original language, and you're going to find out it's talking about a great conflict, a great warfare that is going to open the time of the end. Verse 14, just a little bit down the page. Now I have come to make you understand what will happen to your people when? In the latter days. Same thing. You want to check this word out, latter days, last days, end of time. This is what it's talking about. For the vision refers to many days yet to come. Now I want to look at this verse because this is quite interesting. It says here, now I will tell you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. This is how the prophecy starts. This is the great conflict that it's talking about. You're saying, well, that's Persia and Medo-Persia and Greece. Well, just hang on. Let's We're gonna take care of that in a few minutes. Explain that. Daniel 12 verse 4, again, this is wrapping up the book of Daniel. So it says, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Here again, you want to look up that word seal and see what that says. It's like it's locking it up. So if somebody locks something and you cannot get in. If God seals something, you're not going to get into it. He said it's not going to be unsealed until the time of the end. Knowledge will increase. What kind of knowledge? Knowledge on these prophecies. Why? Because God wants people to know what it says. He does not want you to be taken unawares. He doesn't want you to get T-boned, as it were, in the intersection. You didn't even see what was coming. He wants you to be able to see that intersection coming, and you can go around the mess in the intersection. This is what God is doing with these prophecies. The prophecies are actually, in my mind, a love letter to his church. Revelation, the book of Revelation, calls it the testimony of Yeshua. It's his testimony of what's going to happen to his church and the world at the time of the end, so his church can brace themselves for the conflict. Goes on in a couple more verses down to get the point. This is now about 6 times in these prophecies that God is telling us, this is at the end. Go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Has the time of the end been in any previous generation? Now listen to the context when Yeshua talks about the time of the end. He says the generation that sees these things, they will know, and that the end will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. So when the generation that starts to see these events will not pass away until it's all fulfilled. That's the generation of the time of the end. And those people that have gone before us, that have died and gone before us, they are not the generation at the time of the end. That's you and me. That's us. That's anyone reading this today is that generation. Now let's go back, and we're going to go back to look at Daniel 8 and take this, and then we're going to look at some news and see what's going on out there in the world and see how it compares to this. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. Now we don't want to miss this point. Daniel is having this vision, and he says, after the vision that appeared to me at the first. What was Daniel's first vision that involved the time of the end? 4 beasts. That was Daniel's first vision. He had other visions, or he had other dreams, but this was his first vision that we know of that involved the time of the end. And somebody might say, well, wait a minute. He had a dream about the statue. Now, just a minute. Was that Daniel's dream? No, it wasn't Daniel's dream. It was Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And the thing, it says, was revealed to Daniel as well. So this is after the one that appeared to me the first. So his first vision, and when we look at that first vision, we can see it's not only after in time, but it's after in kind. It's very similar. The events, the animals, the circumstances are much the same. And so we can know that these 2 visions are connected. So right now we've got Daniel 7, Daniel 8, Daniel 10 through 12 are all 3 separate visions that were given to Daniel, and we can overlay them. Much like that in the old Encyclopedia Britannicas, or Encyclopedia, World Book encyclopedias, I guess. That's what I had when I was growing up. I know you, generation whatevers. You guys don't know anything about an encyclopedia. I know my daughter knows what encyclopedia, because we were still hanging on to those. Have you ever carried a couple boxes of encyclopedias around? Man, am I ever glad we got rid of those. They were so heavy. But anyways, when you saw the human body, did anyone see those ones with the human body? It had the skeleton, and then you put, some of the, what did it have? The organs, I think, and then the muscles, and and all that kind of stuff, and you got right up to the skin, and that's the way the prophecies are. If you just looked at the skeleton and, oh, that's a human being. Oh, now just a minute, that's not quite what a human being is. And then you get a little bit, you get the organs, that's a human being. And so you can imagine a human being running around with just the organs. No muscle, no skin, no nothing. And then you come around, oh, just a minute. No, there's some more that goes on there. Let's put some muscle on. Oh, so now we're going to have a human being around, just running around with just muscle, just bare muscle. You know, we've seen some hunters come around and they skin some animals, and all it is just muscle. I went to a place down in the States, and they had this museum, and there was a section on the human body, and they had all this stuff, and they had all these things built, and they were actually human beings that gave their bodies for science and stuff, and they made these things, and they preserved these things, and they had them in stages, and they showed all the organs, just like the encyclopedia. It was kind of gross. But anyways, it was really intriguing. You know, this is what people do with Bible prophecy. They take one prophecy and they build a whole theology around it. And pretty soon, that's all they talk about. But instead of gathering as much information, just put all the layers on here. When you put all the layers on here, you can see that you have a product when you're done. You have something that's clear and visible. You've got all the pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. This is what we must do. Number one, we need to look at the red words and look where he points us. That's Daniel. Now, when we see Daniel, as we did the other night, and we saw Daniel 7, and we said, hey, let's have a look at Revelation 13, and we can see the same story. It's just a little more information. So, because the book of Revelation is called the revelation of Yeshua. So this is amazing to me. Yeshua in Matthew and Mark and Luke says, at the time of the end, go to Daniel. Yeshua knew he was in Daniel. He saw himself in the fiery furnace. He learned that that's who he was. He saw himself in the book of Daniel. He saw himself in Daniel chapter 8. He saw himself in Daniel chapter 9. And he saw himself again in Daniel 10 through 12. Yeshua had to learn about himself in those chapters. So when he gives the revelation to John, gives it to the angel, and then the angel gives it to John, Yeshua again is only piggybacking on something that he already revealed in the book of Daniel. It's the second witness, if you will. It's the second witness to the book of Daniel. In the third year of the reign, Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me after the first one, Daniel 7. And I saw in the vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was in Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, I was by the river Ulai. We don't want to miss this. It's not just ink on paper. Every word in this prophecy is important. God isn't just trying to fill pages in a book. It's all detail. We saw in Daniel chapter 7, if you remember from the other night, it says Daniel wrote down the main facts. Oh my goodness, I wish I had all the facts. Well, here's a few more facts in Daniel chapter 8 that Daniel 7 didn't have. It's the prelude to Daniel chapter 7. So in Daniel chapter 8, we have this war, which is not included. The war actually sets the stage for the beginning of Daniel chapter 7. It's the prelude. It's what sends us into this very troublous time, this time of the end when the four winds are let loose. And we see that in the prophecies. So Daniel is in the capital. He's in the palace. But he sees that he's transported to another place on the Ulai River or the Ulai Canal. Modern day Karun River. Most Bible commentators understand that this is the Karun River. It runs, we're going to see a picture of this in a minute, see exactly where it is. Southern Iran, and Daniel was in the palace just a little bit north of this river, and he's transported down here. Now, God has a purpose in that, which we're going to see. But when I'm bringing it up, it's very important that these details are here. It gives us a view of where this vision takes place. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So we see an animal. What does an animal represent?
A kingdom.
A kingdom. But what happens when the animal has horns? Those are kings. So now the animal represents something more. It's an amalgamation of kingdoms. It's a grouping of kingdoms. It's a joining of kingdoms together. And the horns that are on its head represents the main kingdoms that are controlling that power. So that's what we have. We see a group, amalgamation of kingdoms, and we see 2 horns that are controlling, and it says one is higher, and the higher one comes up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and he became great. Now we're going to look at a progression here. You're going to see great, very great, and exceedingly great. This one only gets great. The next one gets exceedingly great. And you can see power is shifting all along the way. So the ram is pushing. Which is the first direction it's pushing? That's very important. It's pushing west. It's pushing west. And then, once it's pushed west, it's going to push north. And then when it pushes north, it's going to push south. And pretty soon it's going to be pushing in all directions. But there's one direction it says it's not pushing. East. Very good reason for that. So that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will, and he became great. So this ram is going to become great, a great power in the world. It goes on to say that suddenly a male goat, okay, we've got an introduction of another animal. Introduction of another animal. The male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between its eyes. Now, you see that picture of the world. I really don't care what shape you think that this thing that we're on. I don't really care. What I do care about, this is a picture that's used across the world. Everyone knows what this picture looks like. Those people in China, Russia, the Middle East, Canada, the United States, they all know which direction here is west and what it is to be across the surface of the whole earth. Is that making sense? Yeah. Okay, so anyone on the planet can look at this prophecy and figure out what this means. Now, this says, at the time of the end, there's going to be a power that comes from the west across the surface of the whole earth. Now you just tell me who that is, please. Where's a child? Seth, tell me something. On this map, if there was a power that was going to come across the surface of the whole earth from the west, what country would that likely be? Wow. Seth is 10 years old, and I asked the question, what power could that possibly be? And he said the United States. It's just that simple. Now, Seth is an intelligent young man, but most adults should be able to figure this out. This is not complicated. This is what I'm trying to tell people. The prophecies are actually not complicated if you just take it for what it says. We don't need to make up some big explanation about this. It just says it. Just says it. Suddenly comes across the surface without touching the ground. The only way the United States can get anywhere across the surface of the old earth, they can't touch the ground. They either have to come by boat or flying. They have to come by boat or they have to fly. Is that the way that the United States gets to the other side of the world? Yes. Their Navy is second to none, and their Air Force is second to none, because they knew if they were going to have to do battle with those on the other hemisphere, they were going to have a Navy and an Air Force that they could do this in a moment's notice. So they have built their Air Force and Navy to be the greatest in the world. And it's no surprise, it is the greatest in the world. No question. But other nations like Russia and China are now challenging the United States. So the goat has a notable horn between its eyes. So let's just park ourselves here for another 30 seconds. So we said that animals represent what when they have horns?
Kings.
Animals represent what when they have horns? Groups of kingdoms. The horns represent dominant kingdoms that direct traffic of the beast. Whatever the beast is, where this is consistent in all the prophecies. This is the way it works in Daniel's prophecies and in Revelation. That's the way it works. So we see quite possible here what we're looking at is an amalgamation of kingdoms. I'm not going to say how many yet, we haven't seen, but we've got more than one kingdom, but we have a notable horn. Now the word notable is what kind of a term? It's a comparative term. Just the very word demands that there's other horns. But there's a notable horn. Is that making sense to you? Yeah. That's what it says. So often we just read right on by and we don't, what is this actually saying? What is this actually saying? So there's other kingdoms here. And this makes a lot more sense when we understand that the animal, if it has horns, it's more than just one kingdom. There's other kingdoms involved. And we're going to see this. We're going to see this as we go. So it has a notable horn. So if there's a goat or if there's a ram out there in the world and it's causing trouble and there's another animal that comes across the whole surface of the earth and it's led by a number one power that comes across the surface of the whole earth, who do you suppose the horn represents? Has to be the United States. I'm not for this prophecy because it's not really good news. I'm just trying to explain what it means. I'm just trying to explain what it means. This is what it says, and we're trying to make some sense out of this. So it has a notable horn between its eyes, right there. And it comes across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground. And we're going to look at where this is in the Middle East. You guys already told me when you're watching the news, you're seeing a conflict developing with the Middle East. That's exactly what's brewing, and we're going to see that. Goes on to say, and he, the goat, came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran at him, the ram, with the fury of his power. Have you ever done that to anyone? Have you ever hit someone with the fury of his power? Now, you may not want to admit that. So if you have, you don't need to reveal yourself. But I don't know. I've never done that. I've never done that. So here we see an animal come in the fury of his power. So what must have happened? He was aggravated, and he went after the one he was aggravated at. So we've got a kingdom, a conglomerate of kingdoms led by the West, led by the United States, that's going to go after somebody in the fury of his power. Do you know what I actually think might happen? Have you ever been stabbed in the back? Has anyone been? I'm talking figuratively. What does it make you feel like? Yeah, I think the United States might have a stabbing in the back coming very, very soon. It's looking like it. We're going to look at some news articles here. And we're going to see that there's a very real possibility that they are going to be so furious when this thing comes to pass because they have been stabbed in the back. Daniel 8:7, and I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with choler, old English word that means absolutely the most rage you can get. That's what it means. And he smote the ram. Okay, so that'd be a butt kick probably. And broke his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him to the ground, and he stamped upon him. Like it's over. It's over. He destroys the ram, breaks both the powers, the main powers that are controlling, and then he stamps on him. That's the death of the ram. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. The ram will have those that try and deliver him, but they won't. That's why there was no one that could. There was no one that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Goes on to say, therefore the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, there's this ascension again. So once the ram is done, the goat becomes very great. This is where Daniel 7 starts. We saw this the other night. If you haven't seen those videos from the other night, most of you here, but if anyone online hasn't seen those two videos that we looked at, Daniel chapter 7, part 1 and part 2, you need to watch those because this is where the vision of Daniel 7 starts. We've just seen the preview or the prelude to Daniel chapter 7 that is not included in Daniel chapter 7. The four beasts are these four horns that come up. And we can see, we're not going to get into it tonight, but we can see as this thing unpacks, we can see that the rest of the story lines up with Daniel chapter 7 and Revelation chapter 13. This is what these prophecies are. They're just saddled on each other. Therefore, the male goat grew very great. That's this move after this war. That's a move closer to a new world order. This movement becomes great when this new world order is coming in. But when this new world order is coming in, what happens? What does the prophecy say? You can read it. The horn, the lead horn, the notable horn was broken. That means the United States is broken. That's when I believe the United States will become a third world nation. This war that they are going to lead the whole world into, they are going to pay a very dear price for. But up here that are north of the 49th parallel, we're going to pay the same price because we will be with them in this war. Our militaries will join with their military and we will be with them. England will be with them. Europe will be with them. And this is where most people don't understand. Russia and China will also be with them. You know, we're going to look at some news and we're going to see some very interesting things here. Most people are looking for a great big war, an Armageddon, where Russia's going to join up with the Muslims and China's going to fight with them and they're all going to have war against the United States. This is what I call fake news. Have you heard that term? Yeah. We're going to look at that concept here in a minute. There are so much going on in the world, so much to distract us, to get us off course. If we would just read the prophecies, we can tell who's going to war with who. So we need to understand what these prophecies say so that we can be focused on the right things. Now, we looked at this the other night. I just want to bring this slide in so that we can see who these four horns are. We looked at this briefly the other night with Daniel chapter 7 and the four beasts. We saw in the UN Security Council, we saw there were 5 permanent members after the Second World War. They created a system, a global system called the UN. And guess what? The winners of the war put themselves as the generals in the whole thing, and they even established it in a way that other countries would revolve around, come in, and they'd sit on the permanent, or they would sit on the council, but they wouldn't be permanent members, and they would rotate. They would be voted in and out, and they would rotate. So all the countries that were in good standing would have representatives on the UN Security Council, but they would not be permanent members. The 5 permanent members are the ones that were winners in the Second World War. They made the rules for the game. Isn't it nice when you make the rules for the game? You make your own rules. And so you can win the game usually if you make your own rules. Have you ever made the rules as you went along? That's what the 5 permanent members do. They make rules as they go along. And they have to okay it. And it doesn't matter if Canada doesn't like it. Doesn't matter if another country doesn't like it. These are the ones, these are the countries that are the 5 permanent members: United States, Great Britain, Russia, China, and France. And we talked about the possibility of France, the way the EU is setting itself up right now, is restructuring with Brexit. We're going to talk a little bit about Brexit as we go. But France will likely represent the EU in the United Nations. They will be the representative country. Either that, or they will step aside and let the EU have a voice itself. Not sure how that's going to look at this point yet. But when the United States is broken, how many are left? These are the 4 horns that it talks about. When that one is broken, when the lead horn is broken, 4 come up to take its place. 4 dominant ones come up to take its place. I don't think there's any coincidence that we can see the United Nations Security Council permanent members. There are only 4. There's not 5 left. There's not 6 left. There's not 3 left. There's exactly what the prophecies suggest, that they declare. Now, I'm just wondering if God got lucky, or he actually knew how many nations at the end of time would dominate the world scene. What do you suppose?
What if he already knew?
This is really how simple it is. We've got to come to grips with the Almighty is omniscience. That means he knows everything. And you know what? I can't explain that. But when I read these prophecies, it's very, very much of how these prophecies are written. He knew in advance. He knew beforehand, thousands of years. Daniel, these prophecies are over 2,500 years old, and he gave these to Daniel. Repeated them again to John in the book of Revelation. So we can see here that we're shaping up. We can see these countries now. They're jostling Great Britain, Russia, China, and France. In place of it, that would be the United States, 4 horns come up, just as the prophecies indicate. This is the beginning, at this verse, is the beginning of Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. That's where we're at in the prophecies. This also, this amalgamation, this beast, this goat, that is headed up by these, this is the same picture we see in Revelation chapter 13. It's exactly the same beast. Everything's the same. Revelation or Daniel chapter 7, we saw the lion and the eagle joined together. And who was that? Does anyone remember who that was? The United States and Great Britain as a joint issue. We can see that Brexit, and we're going to talk a little more. I don't want to get there just yet, but we can see this movement of Great Britain away from the European Union and left all by themselves. If they don't join with the West, the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, if they don't come more towards the West, they're going to find themselves all by themselves. So this is the picture that we see in the prophecies, that they want to align themselves more with the West. They have far more in common. The people that remember the history of the First World War and the Second World War, who were they fighting? who was the main people that England was fighting in the Second World War? Germany. And those Austria, but it was primarily Germany, right? Who is the dominant force in the European Union? It's Germany, again. So these people that are older, the young people don't understand this, but the older people, for the most part, they don't want any part of being in subjection to Germany again. They fought 2 wars against that. They are not going to submit to the authority of the United Europe. In a sense, the war now is an economic war. Have you heard the war on economics? Trump, sanctions? That's an economic war. The world is fighting economic wars right now. He just told Turkey that I will break your economy if you don't do what I said. That's a war. That's a declaration of war. Iran's the same thing. I will break you. Not one drop of oil is going to come out of your country. That's war. It's economic war that's being played. And that's why these nations are joining together, because they don't want to find themselves all alone. They're joining together. The European Union, England, some of these articles, when you're reading them, they said, we have much more in common with our Anglo-American brothers than we do have anything in Europe. They recognize that. It's the same people groups, basically. So we see that in these prophecies as they're moving to be fulfilled. So we've got a movement in these. So you see the black line there. It starts at England. It goes over to the United States. This is how these will join together, go down through southern Africa. I somehow think the English have a little bit of impact down there as well. And then across to Australia and New Zealand. This will be the Anglo-Saxon, the English type speaking countries that have more in common with each other, have more of the same values, the Judeo-Christian values. Basically, that's where they got their beginnings. We'll see another block forming once the United States is broken. England, in the yellow circle there, finds itself all alone, and that's exactly what the prophecy says. When the eagle's wings are broken off, the large horn is broken, England will have to, it says, stand on its own 2 feet like a man. Has to stand up for itself. England's going to find itself all alone as well. Russia, the bear block will be formed, and once the United States goes down, Russia will let loose and they will take everything they want. And because they have a working agreement with China, I don't doubt that China and Russia will work it out. Well, you take that piece of the pie and I'll take this piece of the pie. They're quite happy with that. Now, if you were China, what piece of the pie would you take? It's just a reasonable question. Wouldn't you take all those Asian countries? So it's very likely that Asia, China, will take those Asian blocks. The only reason why Japan is standing where it is because it's got the United States backing it up. Taiwan, the United States is backing it up. Hong Kong, the United States is backing it up. With the United States out of the way, what is China going to do? This is my piece. And Russia is not going to fight China. They have an understanding. They work together. Their enemy is not each other. It's the United States. It's the West. That's always been their enemy. It's always been their enemy. And then we'll have Europe, of course. The European Union will solidify. It tells us that this kingdom will have 10 dominant kings. There's going to be another little horn that comes out of that. We're not going to focus on that tonight. We spent a lot of time on that the other night. So for you that haven't seen those videos, here again, I would ask you to go back to there. Tells us in Daniel chapter 8, verse 9, out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. This is the 4th beast of Daniel. This is the horn that has 10 horns, which is 10 kingdoms, 10 dominant kingdoms. And it says another one comes up, And it says that it grows how big? Exceedingly great. So the ram was great. The New World Order is very great. And the little horn becomes exceedingly great. Daniel 7 tells us he consumes the whole earth. He becomes the dominant force. He becomes the mayor, if you will, of the whole earth. He becomes the king of kings on the whole earth, telling different kingdoms what to do. And we see this picture in Revelation as well. It says here that he goes southeast and then to the glorious land. Now, I know you people that live at Camp Tamid, you think the glorious land is Camp Tamid, right? Absolutely you do. And those that are in the United States of America, they think the glorious land is in the United States of America. But if we let the Bible interpret itself, where do you suppose that the Bible would declare the glorious land is? Right, Israel, Jerusalem. For whatever reason, God has a special love for that place. My personal belief is that's because his son shed his blood on a rock in the Middle East. That's where the sacrifice that's to save the whole world was made. He's got a special place in his heart for that rock. So this little horn power is going to go to Jerusalem, and he's become exceedingly great. He will rule the world from Jerusalem. The ram. Let's go back to try and make some sense out of this vision now. We've looked at it briefly. The ram, I believe, is Islam. It says it's got two horns. The two horns, they are kings, and they are the kings of Media and Persia. We don't have to try and guess who these kings are. Now, it's very interesting that this book was written in the time of Daniel. This was written in the time of Babylon. So Media Persia actually was not on the stream yet. So this was even a prophecy in the future. This was not in the time of Cyrus or Darius. But he says in the time of Babylon that these are the kings of Media and Persia. Now, if we do a little bit of history homework here, when Media Persia was at its height of its empire, it encompassed, if you're very good at geography, you can tell, can you guys see where Turkey is on that map? Okay, you can see the Mediterranean, Cyprus. You can see Cyprus on that map? Yeah. Turkey is right above it. That's where Turkey is, the big peninsula that comes up. That's Turkey. And up, that was Greece and Macedonia. And there was a lot of Medes and Persians that influenced that area as well. So they took over that area. And it went right across what they call the Caucasus. And you hear that term on the news even today. Those are the southern countries of where Russia, that's Kurdistan, Uzbekistan, all these stands that are across. There's about 5 of them right across southern Russia. These countries are predominantly Muslim. And they go right across there. So it went skimmed right across southern Russia, all the way to Afghanistan, to your far right, and Pakistan to the south, all the way to the top of India. So this is the height of the Medo-Persian Empire, goes down into the Arabian Sea, across the Persian Gulf, skips across Arabia, and then across to Egypt and as far as Libya. So it's that whole area. So there's a lot of people that have interpreted this prophecy as being back in that time. But we saw at least 6 times where it says this prophecy is at the end. So how do we make sense of this? Would it have made sense to all the Bible writers? Iraq and Iran weren't even named as countries for the last 100 years. Some of these countries didn't even exist. So God did not put the names of these countries, but he showed the areas. He codified it, if you will. So he said, these are the kings of Media and Persia. So what we do is we go in history, find out where the kings of Media and Persia were back in the day of Daniel, and we can see the areas on the globe, on the world, that where the Arabs are are where the kings of Media and Persia are. And the Persians, we don't want to make this mistake. Persians are Persians and Arabs are Arabs. They're two different people groups. And that's the way that is. So it encompasses the Arab population and the Persians of today. Exactly. And so what I did, I thought, I'm just going to try something here. So what I did was, the best I could, I took a line and I drew around the kings of Media and Persia in that old historical map. And guess what? It takes in the main countries of the Arab world and where Iran is. This is exactly the area that this prophecy was of the time of the end that the West would make war against. Is this starting to make some sense? Some pretty good sense? This is what it says. So we go on and we can see that God actually draws a bullseye of the center of the conflict. You see, that's where Daniel was transported. That's where the Ulai River meets the Tigris. And we're going to see that's exactly what it was saying. It's in the news today that there's a spot in the Persian Gulf that narrows, where 1/5 of the world's oil supply goes in and out of there every day. Iran has said that they will shut the Persian Gulf down in a moment if they're attacked. And people think, oh, they can't do it. You want to believe they could do it. They could do it in an instant. They have some equipment that most people are not aware of that they have. They could close this straight down. What do you suppose would happen to the world economy if the oil transportation was shut down in the Middle East? It would crash. Oil would go to like $500 a barrel. Gasoline would be rationed instantly.
There would be no food.
Things would change. There would be no movement of food. Exactly. This would bring on complete chaos for sure. So when we look at the kings of Media and Persia, we can see it's the Islamic nations. These are the kings of Media and Persia today. Same people groups, just different ideology. So going back to what Yeshua says in Matthew 24, when you see these things, know that the end is near. This is how I know the end is near. No time in history have we had a war that would encompass the whole world that was against the kings of the Media and Persia. We've had the Crusades, but that was basically against primarily Rome and the Muslims. But this is a world war that everyone will be involved. And people say, well, China's not going to fight this war with the United States. Russia's not going to fight this war against the United States. Oh, just a minute. Do we understand what the ideology of Islam is? It's to rule the world. The entire world. To bring Sharia law in the entire world. When they believe it's time to do it, they will do it. And that will include Russia, because they are infidels. The Chinese are infidels. Anyone that's not a Muslim is an infidel. When the Muslims believe it's time to move on the world, this is why it says it goes west first. Which direction is it pushing? Right now. Which direction is Islam pushing? It's west. They're pushing against the west. That's the first direction. That's what we have going on right now. Which direction is north? From the Middle East. It's Russia. South is down into Asia. It's pushing down into there. When they start pushing in all directions, this is when it's going to be a world war. Right now, we're just seeing this thing start. The ball is just starting to roll. And we can watch it, and it's going to pick up speed. China has their problems with Muslims. They've got over 1 million. They deny it, but it's common knowledge. You can check this out on the internet, in the news, in the legitimate news. They have over 1 million Muslims in what they're referring to as detention camps. Yeah. Yeah. They've got their own problems with Muslims. Lots of them.
Why are they in
because they won't bow down to the Chinese government. You see, Islam, and here again, I want to make it very clear, because I am not against people. I love all people groups. But there's ideas and concepts that I think aren't good. And Islam's concept is to take over the whole world and to rule with Sharia law, and everyone will be under Sharia law. And if you don't submit to it, well, your head will roll. They've already showed us this. They've already showed us this. The people in ISIS actually just take their religion seriously. Yeah. Yeah, they do. And so this is where we're going. And like I say, not all Muslims believe that they're going to take the world by force, but enough do. The numbers are staggering. 30 to 40% they believe could be radicalized very quickly. There's 1.6 billion of them. 30 to 40%. We can't even imagine what that would do. We can't. So this is where we're heading. Russia, I understand there's 2 million Muslims in Moscow alone. Yeah, this is real. Moscow is going to be in trouble. Right now, President Putin, he courts them. But you see, they don't understand. They're not reading this prophecy. The weapons that the West, China, and Russia, the weapons that they have sold to the Muslims will be all turned around and used against them. They are buying the best of the best that money can buy. And they are loaded to the hilt. It's amazing. And no one knows this, apparently. No one knows it. Well, we don't watch the news because it's kind of depressing. Well, guess what? The news is going to meet all of us sooner or later. It might be a good idea to know what's coming. That's my opinion. So we can see when we compare the maps together, we can see that the Muslim countries overlay perfectly where the kings of Media and Persia reigned many, many years ago. There's another part of the equation that enters into it. Are God's promises sure? He promised the son of Abraham, his firstborn, that he would become a great nation. Wow. Ishmael's descendants have surely become a great nation. Nearly 1/4 of the population of the earth. My goodness. That's amazing. That's amazing. And do you know what? God is going to use Abraham's firstborn to lay a licking on his secondborn. Oh my goodness. What a concept. But this is how he's always worked. This is nothing new. It's just that the house of Israel has extended itself across the world. And even the Christians become involved because they're of the seed of Abraham. The Christians are in a great apostasy right now. And God is going to get their attention and allow their enemies to come down on them like a flood and bring them to their knees. That's the whole point. You know that God is actually doing this? He's allowing it to happen because he loves us? Can you relate to that? His ways are not our ways. No, for sure. They're not our ways. But the reason why he's going to do this is so that we will come to our knees and understand that we're not in heaven yet. Most Americans think they live in heaven already. Well, he wants them to understand they haven't reached the promised land yet. And he's going to allow this to happen. He's going to do what he's always done and allowed the enemies of Israel to come in like a flood. Geographical fix. I was by the river Ulai, the Karun, in Daniel 8, verse 2. I was by the side of the great river, that is the Tigris. That's Daniel chapter 11. Daniel 10 through 12, he was by the Tigris. We have a geographical fix. It says, I was by the river Ulai. This is Daniel. Transported. Remember when I said he was transported to this place? That's not where he was when he had the vision. Transported to that place. And then when he had the vision of Daniel 10 through 12, it says he was by the great river, that is the Tigris. So here they didn't have GPS at that day. They didn't have latitude and longitude. He could have given us some numbers, some coordinates. He gave us two great rivers of Babylon. And he said, this is the mark. X marks the spot. And he shows us that this is actually the center stage for the vision. Daniel was transported in the center of the kings of Media and Persia, and that's where he saw the vision. There's no coincidence here. He could have turned around in any direction and he could have saw the conflict raging. Absolutely raging. He was right in the center of the situation. Daniel 11 verse 2 gives us a little more information about these kings, the kings of Media and Persia. That's all we know. The higher one came up last. That's what it says in Daniel 8. But Daniel 10 through 12, like that layer, gives us a little more. Let's get some more detail here. 3 more kings will arise in Persia. Remember what I said? This is an amalgamation of kingdoms. This is Islam as a whole. When we start to see kingdoms amassing their wealth and arms and working together, when we start to see Islam working together closer as a unit, when we start to see it join forces in the world, we can know that this prophecy is coming to fruition. It says 3 more kings will arise in Persia, and a 4th will be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of Greece. We're going to get to Greece here in a minute, where we're dealing with the kings of Media and Persia. So, if I was to ask you, in the knowledge that you have, which king of Media and Persia would you suggest is the richest and the greatest? Saudi Arabia. Absolutely. We're going to look at a few numbers here in a minute. Saudi Arabia has been amassing weapons for years and years and years. And they've had all the money to buy the best they can get. And they have done that. Into the billions of dollars every year. And it's not just a couple billion. It's tens of billions every year that they're buying weapons. And that's just one of these countries. The higher one came up last. This highest one that comes up last, I believe to be Saudi Arabia. It can only be Saudi Arabia. So here we have a few of the kings that are involved right now that we're going to be looking at. The first one is Iran, is the instigator. He's the instigator. Does anyone remember 1979? I know that's a long time. That's before a lot of you people were born. You remember 1979 from history, but you weren't there. 1979, the Shah of Iran, hostage taking, 400 plus days. Who remembers that? That was the beginning of the Islamic Revolution. That's what they called it. The Islamic Revolution. They wanted to start a revolution that would go out from there to the world. We're seeing that has taken from 79 to 19. What is that, 30 years, 40 years? Thank you. There was a movie that was made, and I'm not promoting Hollywood here, but if you don't know much about that, there was a movie that was made that kind of stuck a little bit to the script, to the way it actually happened, called Argo. Has anyone heard of the movie Argo? If you haven't watched that, not trying to, like I say, I'm not trying to promote Hollywood, but it was a story of the hostage taking in Iran when Jimmy Carter was president, and it sort of showed how that unfolded and what exactly happened. And that was the Islamic Revolution. The interesting part was is this changed, as it were, overnight. And one of the expressions in the movie was that nobody saw this coming. Are you kidding? This wholesale change in the Middle East that was the United States' closest ally in the Middle East, and they basically flipped overnight to radical Islam. That was when the Ayatollah Khomeini came in and took the whole country. They ended up owning all the American weapons that were in the country at that time, and they took total control, and they held hostages as well. Pardon me? They were very mad at the West because the Shah that stole basically the country blind, the West supported him, and they allowed him to come to the United States, and they were furious. They wanted to bring him back and put him to trial, probably hang him. It's probably what would have happened, but he was protected. He ended up dying. I think he got very sick, got cancer or something like that, but he died not too long after. That's what happened to him. But they started, the reason why I bring that up is they started this Islamic revolution that has been growing slowly. It's been brewing in the Middle East. And when the Arab Spring came along, several years back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it started to go. First it was Tunisia, then Libya, Colonel Gaddafi. You guys remember that? That's all this history that's building up to where we've got, is the Islamic fundamentalists were gaining control in the Middle East. And this is what we see. This is what we have going on in Syria. This is what we have going on in Turkey, and so on. We're seeing these kingdoms start working together. So Iran was where it started. Iraq, let's get rid of that one. Iraq, the Iraq-Iran war, I don't know if you remember that, during the 80s. This is what happened. This was promoted by the United States, actually. They gave Saddam Hussein weapons, apparently of mass destruction. That's how they knew that they had them, because they gave to them.
Is that the Gulf War?
No, that was a war between Iraq and Iran that was what they call a proxy war. It was the United States wanted to control Iran because it was getting too strong, and they wanted to hold them in check. So both Britain and the United States supported that war on the Iraqi side to try and suppress Iran from the Islamic awakening spreading over its borders. And so this is what happened then. But Iraq, so what happened? They went in to take out Saddam Hussein later on because he wasn't going to go along with the United States. So they took him out. And what they did was they actually opened a way for Iran and Iraq to work together, because it's 60% Shia Muslim, which is what Iran is. So now what the United States has done is they've opened the way for this prophecy to be fulfilled. And we see that going on in Syria today. They were taking out ISIS, which was battling Syria. So it's actually helped Syria get established again. President Bashar al-Assad. So they've done again. They've made a way for this prophecy to come to pass. Sometimes I wonder, do they know what's going on here? But we can see this happening here. So we see these kings joining, and Syria is working with Iran. Now Syria can go all the way through Iraq and get to Syria by land, because the United States basically has pulled out. And now Iran has access to Iraq and Syria and all the way to Lebanon. So there's a bridge, a land bridge now that's making its way across, and these countries are now working together. So this Islamic awakening is spreading. Nobody knows about this prophecy. It's the best kept secret. And Saudi Arabia, of course, I believe, is that fourth king that's far richer than them all. Turkey up there in the north. Turkey is in the news a lot these days. Turkey is actually starting to work much more closely with Iran. And they're starting to work a little bit with Syria. They're having problems in the north with the Kurds. Both Syria and Iran Turkey have their problems. So we can see, I'm just trying to bring you up to date on what's going on in the Middle East. We can see these connections. There are rumblings of late. Saudi Arabia and Iran are arch enemies, if you will. But there are rumblings in Saudi Arabia now amongst the princes, amongst the royal family, is that they shouldn't be so hard on their Iranian friends because they can see what's going on in the Arab world, and pretty soon they might be left all by themselves if they don't start making some concessions with Iran. So there is a movement. The clerics, some of the clerics, the ones that are more Islamic fundamentalists, they're starting to say, hey, these are our brothers in the faith. We have more in common. We have more in common with them than the United States. And we need to really rethink some of this stuff. And I just wanted to pull these numbers up. $70 billion in arms spending in 2018 in Saudi Arabia alone. Alone. They've been doing this on a yearly basis. But that reached a new height, $70 billion. And by the way, you people in the United States and Great Britain, Canada is involved as well. They sold a whole bunch of personnel carriers to Saudi Arabia, which now they're starting to reconsider because some people are seeing the writing on the wall that this may not be a good thing. And some of these countries, a lot of pressure in the United States right now that we should not be selling arms to Saudi Arabia. A lot of pressure because people are starting to see that this whole thing could flip really, really quickly, just the same way it happened in Iran many years back. So we see here the goat, the west, Daniel 8:21, it says the rough goat is the king of Grecia, the west, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, or the dominant king, the notable king. So people say, well, that's Grecia. Well, let's look at this. We saw that God was trying to give a geographical fix when he talked about the ram. Could this be what he's doing with this part of the prophecy? We see the Medo-Persian Empire today is these kingdoms. So what has he done for these other kingdoms, this king of Greece? If we do a little bit of history, we're going to find out that Greece is the beginning of what is called the West. No coincidence here. Everything beyond that is called the West. And Greece is the line. So I think in terms of definition, at the time of the end, this power that comes from the west, the king of Grecia, this power from the west that comes across the surface of the whole earth. We've got a contradiction here going on if we don't understand this properly. If we're going to try and apply this in history, is Greece across the surface of the whole earth? So this is a prophecy. We're told 3 times within this prophecy. Daniel, this is at the end. This is the end. This is the end. Is Greece a country that could play a role in a war in the time of the end? Would they be a dominant king? No. But could they play a role?
But they have a military.
They have a military, but I don't think that Greece is going to take on the Middle East.
No.
But anytime there's a war, what happens is the countries try and get as close as they can to the country they're invading. Because they haven't got fuel all the time to fly their jets all the way across the world, back and forth, and all this kind of stuff. So what they try and do is they try and get as close in proximity to the war stage as they can. Now let me ask you the question. Do you think Greece will play a part in this war? There's no question. There will probably be more military in Greece. It will look like Greece is completely consumed in this war. They have ports, the UK has ports, the United States has ports, and even Russia is building ports in Greece. There's no coincidences here. These countries are getting ready for something, and they don't know what it is, but they are getting ready for it. So we can see that Greece will play a part. They are not only the West, the beginning of the West, Western civilization, the border is right there. There's no disputing that. That's in history books. You can read all about that. I don't think God was taken by surprise when we happen to call everything east or everything west of Turkey is called the West. And that's the way the prophecies are written. The other interesting part is down at the bottom, you'll see an arrow coming up. You see that on the map? In the Gulf War, the United States and the forces that joined together, the alliance, they came up from the south. They came from the Mediterranean as well, but primarily they came up through the Gulf, through the Persian Gulf. Now, if those countries, if all those Arab countries joined together, is it possible for them to come up anymore? They would be surrounded. The Persian Gulf is not going to be safe. If all the Arab nations join together, they will in no ways be able to come up in through the Persian Gulf. They will have to do it, just as prophecy says, they will have to come from the west, across the surface of the whole earth. That's the only way they can do it. They can't do it any other way. Yes?
It's of the understanding that the United States is now self-sufficient for oil. Is that incorrect?
They have enough oil to support themselves. The question is for how long? Right. And do they have it all developed? How long would it take to develop the reservoir of oil that they have? That's a great point. Yes. And you know, it's very interesting. The comment was made, does the United States have enough oil to support themselves? And they claim they do. Isn't it interesting that they're using everyone else's oil and saving their reserves? It's kind of like us. Here at the camp, we don't like to cut our green trees down to get firewood. We go off the property and cut the dead trees down, and we want to save all the trees on the property. It's legal, by the way, to cut dead trees down. So we're not doing anything we shouldn't do. But this, they're being wise, they're using oil from outside the country. But they apparently are self-sufficient. And when they get cut off, when the Middle East is cut off, they could very well start up. And that'll be what is going to be one of their saving graces, to come back after they are broken. Okay, so we're going to look at a few news articles here, and then I'm going to let you go because I don't want you to go to sleep. It's getting late at night. So here we have a bunch of news articles, and I couldn't resist myself. I just had to put fake news up there. There's a lot of fake news up there that we don't know if it's true or false. And there's a lot of false flags, so to speak. The enemy of souls has a lot of false flags. He's got a lot of things going on in the world to distract people. Everything from conspiracy theories to things that don't have anything to do with prophecy. He's got everyone consumed in everything but what they should be consumed in. So everyone's reading all the news. They want to find out. All the prophetic guys are all, oh, this is what's going on. This got to watch out. Russia's going to come down from the north, and they're going to join up with Iran, and they're going to fight the West, and it's going to be Armageddon overnight. Well, just a minute. It's not going to happen that quickly. It's going to be in stages. The first stage is this amalgamation with these kingdoms that will fight the Middle East. Russia will actually fight against Islam when it comes down to the real thing. Right now they're on the side of Iran, and they're on the side of Syria. And they're making moves on Turkey as well. So they're working with these countries. But it's because they have a common enemy. The enemy of your friend, or the enemy of your enemy is your friend, right? So they make friends with these people because they have common enemies. And the West is their common enemy at this time. So we have lots of news going out there. So let's look at this, shall we? We're going to deal with some countries here in the Middle East. First thing, let's deal with Saudi Arabia. Middle East, tells us that China, Saudi Arabia does have Chinese ballistic missiles. That's great, isn't it? That's good. That's good news. Yeah. So Saudi Arabia has not only been buying United States weapons, they've been buying weapons from China. They are also now, right now, making agreements with Russia to work with Russia. And they're talking about the possibility of getting the same missile defense system that Turkey just purchased from Russia. Turkey is a NATO ally country that was formed, NATO was formed to make a line, a wall, if you will, from the west to Russia. And Turkey, a NATO country, is buying weapons from Russia. It's a bit of a conflict, isn't it? Sure it is. That's why the United States is very upset with Turkey right now. These are just some of the developments. You see, the Arabs are playing both sides. Anyone have children here? Have you ever had your children play mom and dad? No. Your kids are too good for that, right? Yeah, they play both sides of the fence. Dad said we could have this. Oh, really? You know, this is what they're doing. They're playing both sides. They're buying weapons from both sides. And everyone's starving for what? Right now, everyone on the planet is starving for what? Money. It's money. It's all about money. It's all about weapons sales. So we really don't care as long as we can sell our weapons. Pretty soon, somebody's got too many weapons. Pretty soon, we've got enough weapons, and what's going to happen after that? Saudi Arabia was growing nervous of Iraq's eventually huge missile arsenal. Denied access to U.S. ballistic missiles, Riyadh, Saudi capital, instead went knocking on the door of Beijing, China, which had previously proven willing to export arms to Iran when Moscow and Washington refused to do so. Okay, CIA has now declared that Mohammed bin Salman ordered the assassination of this journalist Khashoggi. And it seemed that the whole world was aware of it. And it was hidden. Why? Money. When you have the money and you have the oil, you can call the shots. He who has the gold makes the rules, right? And that's what's going on here. In the light of Khashoggi's death, it's time to halt business with Saudi Arabia. Listen to this. November 1st, this is last year, news article, GOP senators asked Trump to end nuclear energy talks with Saudi Arabia. Sounds like a good idea. Might be a good idea. Trump's decision to stand by Saudi prince has Netanyahu's fingerprints all over it. Now, we understand the government's changed a little bit in Israel, but the idea is Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump and the Saudi prince, bin Salman, were working together. And so they formed a bit of a confederacy between them, and they were working together in the Middle East. Well, that is going to fall apart. Let's look at Iran. What's going on in Iran? Iran's Rouhani, the president there, calls for Muslims to unite against the United States. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani called on Muslims worldwide on Saturday to unite against the United States instead of rolling out red carpets for criminals. This is in reference to Prince bin Salman and Donald Trump. He considers them criminals, and this had to do with what was going on. Goes on to say, submitting to the West, headed by America. Isn't it interesting how these things are written, these news articles are written, almost just like the prophecies. A power from the West, a notable horn, headed by America, would be treason against our religion. This is a call on Muslims worldwide to unite against the West. would be treason against our religion and against the future generations of this region, Rouhani told the International Conference on Islamic Unity in Tehran in a speech broadcast live on state television. We are ready to defend the interests of the Saudi people. This is the president of Iran speaking. We are willing to defend the interests of the Saudi people. Why did he say this? Because the princes, according to in Iran, the princes of Saudi Arabia are not defending the people of Saudi Arabia, the interests of the people. So they're saying the royal family in Saudi Arabia is not looking after the interests of the people. It says Saudi people against terrorism, aggression, and the superpowers, the United States and Great Britain. And we don't ask for $450 billion to do it. The Saudi government has paid billions of dollars. This is a direct reference to the Saudi government that pays billions of dollars to the United States and Great Britain to defend them. Iran has said, we're not going to even charge you. We want to support you as Muslims, and we will take care of you. You don't have to lean on the West. This is how they're acting in the Gulf. And this is why many countries are starting to second this, because Muslims call America the Great Satan. You guys are aware of that, right? They call them the Great Satan. We have a choice to either roll out red carpets for criminals, and this he's directly referring to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, or to forcefully stand against injustice and remain faithful to our prophet, our Quran, and our Islam, Rouhani said, in an apparent reference to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, which have close ties to Washington. This is the Islamic Revolution speaking to the Islamic world, and they're calling these countries to wake up. Almost every aspect of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani's approach to the nuclear agreement his country made with the major world powers in 2015 finds broad support among the Iranian public. We've been told a bunch of propaganda that the Iranian people, they hate it, they hate it, they hate it. It's actually working exact opposite. They're seeing the support behind the government. Let's put that a little differently. The article brings this out. It says the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign has not driven a wedge between Iran's people and its government. That's the main takeaway from a series of national surveys conducted by the University of Maryland and Iran poll released this week. You see, these sanctions are actually making the country stronger. It's binding them together. It's having exact opposite effect. Talks about a plot by the West. This is what Iran is saying. Iraq now and Iran are working much more closely together. It's a plot, they say, by the West to drive wedges between these Islamic countries. The Ayatollah Khomeini, this is the highest religious authority in the country, in Iran. He says a string of Iranian officials have since come out with statements accusing their country's arch foes, this being the United States, and Saudi Arabia is included in this, of being behind the unrest. Enemies seek to sow discord, but they failed and their conspiracy won't be effective. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was quoted as saying on his office Twitter's account. He says, Iran and Iraq are two nations whose hearts and souls are tied together. This bond will go stronger day by day, it said. State news agency IRNA said the supreme leader was reacting to the violence in Iraq. This is just very recent. The official news agency weighed in on its own commentary, accusing the U.S., Saudi Arabia, and Israel of stirring up the Iraqi protests in order to spoil Iran's ties with Iraq and Syria. So you can see this coming binding now. The U.S., I just want to put this, if anyone is watching this video online, they can stop it here. They can write down this article here. It shows you, this is a video that shows, it was shown on state television in Iran, shows the underground bunkers that they have that are just loaded with missiles. They have said that if you touch us, you will see the earth erupt like a volcano. That's what they've said. Well, they take these videos down and they show you these tunnels in here. You want to see something interesting? Have a look at that. The Yemen country just to the south of Saudi Arabia has had a civil war for years, and the Saudis have been instrumental on being involved in that. And it's believed that Iran is supporting the rebels in the country with their weapons and so on. But this is one way that Saudi Arabia is being surrounded by Iran through these other countries. Erdogan, he's the president of Turkey. This is an article. He says, the article says he becomes unhinged. When you become unhinged, what does that mean? You lose it, right? He lost it one day, and in a speech, compares Israel to Nazi Germany. Now, I'm not comparing Israel to Nazi Germany. He is. And that's his truth. And that's really what's important. This is the way they view Israel. This is the way the Muslims view Israel. And do you know why? It's not Israelis that they're upset about. They're upset about Zionism. Now, you want to do some homework, and there's a difference between a person of Israel and a Zionist. It's the Zionists that they have a struggle with. There's quite a difference. Turkish President Erdogan lashed out against Israel, compared it to Nazi Germany, accusing the U.S. state of trying to erase the traces of Islamic heritage in Jerusalem for the last 50 years. Jerusalem is not merely a cause of a handful of Muslims in Palestine, he continued, but our common cause as Muslims. That's what he's talking about. Blaming the West, here again, the West that came across the surface of the whole earth for fanning strife in the Muslim world. You sow discord in the world. What happens then? They won't unite. So they're starting to see what the West has been doing, sowing this discord so they cannot unite for financial gain. When the tension escalates in the Islamic world, Western companies' profits rise accordingly. When the conflicts escalate in the Middle East, Western governments sell more weapons, he said. Conflict has been ignited between Sunni and Shiite Muslims with the aim of splitting Islam and its followers, he said. Now, this is a Sunni Muslim coming to the realization that the West is sowing discord between the two sects of Islam so that they will not get together. The greatest fear of the West is that the whole of Islam joins forces. That's a great fear, because that's when Islam will make its move and promote its ways amongst all the world. What are we looking for next? We're looking, the next thing that I'm looking at is Saudi Arabia flipping sides, going more towards Islam, fundamental Islam. The Arab Spring actually happening on the Arab Peninsula. The Arab Spring is when the fundamental Islam kind of gets control, and it's not all about money anymore. It's all about Islam and the cause of Islam. Daniel 11:2, now I will show you the truth. Behold, there shall stand up 3 kings in Persia, and the fourth shall be far richer than them all. By his strength, through his riches, he shall stir up all against the realm of the West. Turkey also is involved in this movement in Islam. Turkey's Strategic Research Center for Defenders of Justice is planning to organize an international Islamic conference or Congress every year until 2023 to address Islamic confederal state. Its aims to establish across the Muslim world. So they want to join this. This is what they're trying to do. Goes on to say that they want to promote the creation of a common Muslim economic market. Participants declared the aim to create an Islamic superpower of the future on Islamic lands owned by 60 Islamic countries, inhabited by 1.6 billion Muslims on 19 million kilometers squared, constituting 55.5% of the world oil reserves and 45.6% of the production, and 64.1% of natural gas reserves and 33% of its population. Those are staggering numbers. Absolutely staggering numbers. Deadly diplomatic challenge, Turkey holding 50 U.S. nuclear bombs hostage. These are news headlines just the other day. When the United States built up, when the NATO built up its forces across the wall, as it were, from the West and Russia across Europe, they put nuclear weapons all across the line in strategic locations. There are approximately 50 nuclear weapons in Turkey. And these were the headlines that came out the other day. If Turkey turns against the West, they have 50 nuclear weapons all ready to go. A deadly cache of weapons of mass destruction is essentially being held hostage by the Turkish president in a situation that gets worse by the hour. That's what's going on, and nobody has a clue what's going on. The Muslim nations are at work. They are at work. Right now, what we have in the world is we have these Muslim nations working together, working very closely together, talking back and forth. The phone lines are hot. You see why Saudi Arabia is starting to take a second look at what's going on? There's people in Saudi Arabia that are saying, hey, we shouldn't be so hard on these guys. We have a lot in common with them. And they're starting to see themselves being surrounded by the Muslim world. They will either have to surrender, literally surrender, or they're going to have to join them. Something is going to happen, and we're getting close to it happening. We can see these nations right now in the world taking shape to take the number one position. We saw that. We have one more thing we want to look at before we go. Boris Johnson said he is confident his Brexit deal will be approved by the House of Commons in a historic vote on Saturday. That's tomorrow. Their Saturday has come. There's going to be a vote this Saturday in England whether they're going to accept this. Whether they accept it or not, it's coming. It's coming. That's what's happening right now. They are waking up. They're 8 hours ahead of us, whatever time that means. Right now, they're waking up. They're all getting their suits and ties on because they're going to vote in the House of Commons in the UK whether they're going to accept this Brexit vote. Whether they accept it tomorrow or not, it is coming. They have already said that they're going to have to move further away from the European Union and join forces with the United States. The trade deals are already in the works. Trump has already been over there. He's talked to them. He's told them, we will be making deals with you. Get out. They've already been encouraged by the government to get out of the European Union. As I said the other night, most people don't realize this. The United States needs Great Britain as much as Great Britain will need the United States when it's outside. And the reason is, when the Great Britain becomes outside the European Union, it's going to need an ally. It cannot stand by itself. That's why it says in the prophecies that the lion and the eagle's wings are together. They need each other. And here's the reason why they need each other. Because Western civilization, the Judeo-Christian values, will die when America goes down. And the United States needs a close ally. They need a powerful ally. London has been known for many, many years as being an economic capital, a money center, and so is New York. They need each other. They will join forces together. So Brexit is another thing we're looking at. We're looking at Saudi Arabia. We're looking at the movements in the Middle East, the joining of Islam together with Saudi Arabia, the one that breaks the back on the joining together. They will all join together when Saudi does. And the main reason is because Mecca and Medina, where all Muslims have to make a journey at least once in their lifetime, these two most holy sites are held in Saudi Arabia. When Saudi Arabia goes against the West, the whole Muslim world, it'll be like a domino effect, and they will all go as well. So this move in Great Britain is also a major event which we're looking at, because the first animal that comes on the scene is a lion with eagle's wings. That's where we're going from here on in. Speaking on Thursday evening after the European leaders unanimously endorsed an outline deal reached earlier in the day, the Prime Minister stressed that it is a great deal for our country and a very good deal for our friends in the EU. The question is, we'll know within hours of whether they're going to accept this or not, or whether it'll have to go with some reworking. But time will tell. We're watching. The fact of the matter is, the time is at hand. The prophecies that we've been told that were coming together for a long time are at hand. We need to do what we can do now, because soon it will be too late to do what we should have done today. Number one, spiritual revival, individually, collectively, and a physical simplification, if you will, of our lives. We need to get rid of those things that are important to us, really, in the big scheme of things. Focus on the things that are important, the things that we're going to need here in the future. So with that, let's have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you again for your grace and your word that is so sure, and you tell us things before they happen. We ask that you continue to reveal your word and your truth. Open our eyes that we might see wondrous things out of it, out of your word. We pray now that you be with us. Father, help us to know individually what we need to do. We pray these things in Yeshua's name. Amen. Man and God, and the Sabbath is what unites them.
Y es lo mismo que significa el hombre y Dios y el sábado en el medio. El sábado es ese pacto matrimonial del hombre con Dios.
All I'm doing here is I'm just pointing you to look at these connections. And when I leave and I'm halfway across the ocean, you're going to be able to start studying this out yourself. So we can't miss these parallels. So we have to study for ourselves. First study group, and they just told us what they were interested in, and that's what we did. So, and you got a handful of Daniel and Revelation again, but that is exactly what they were after. They want to know what all that stuff meant for us today.